Hi folks, Matt Easton here, Scholar Gladiatoria. So just a little comments I suppose and some ideas and some observations about balance of things that you use, such as swords or warhammers, other weapons, even axes to a degree, maces and so on and so forth. What I'm holding here is a basic stick. If any of you pick up a stick and go to swing it around, you can hold it from the end, okay? And that gives you a lot of reach and a lot of power. But what you'll find is, as any of you will immediately probably realise, it's not very nimble. It's not very quick. If I hold it by the end, I can move the thing around okay because it's fairly light. However, if I move my hand down to about there, then suddenly I can move the thing probably with less impact power, but a lot quicker and more nimbly. So it actually becomes a more effective weapon. Okay, so if we take something like a baseball bat, or if you were going to use an axe, or a basic stick or anything else as a weapon, very often you'll find the best way to hold it is not right at the end. Okay, although in some situations that might be what you want to do. If you want to hit someone further away, or if you're using a shield, or if you're fighting with other people and you see that you can snipe someone from further away and they're not looking at you and you want to hit them from far away, you might hold it at the end. However, if you're fighting one-on-one and you want to be able to defend yourself and hit back, and that's why, if we look at shillelaghs and other types of fighting clubs that are often used, usually there is a bit left at the end, and that length varies. I know that some people say that the Irish shillelagh should be used so that this essentially can be used to protect your forearm in certain situations. However, I'd also point out that if you've got a basic stick, often that is about the kind of length that you'll find is actually the most comfortable and nimble to hold the thing. Now, swords are a little bit different because, of course, they're balanced differently. First of all, a blade is not of universal weight all the way along. There might be blades which are of universal weight distribution all the way along. Katana, for example, sometimes has equal weight distribution all the way along. Something like a machete can do. Certain types of falchion and langmesser can also have equal weight distribution. Some swords, even certain types of falchion, for those of you who know the Conyers falchion, or indeed axes and maces, actually have an uneven distribution of weight so that you've got more weight at the hitting end. However, swords, generally, most types of swords, unless they're particularly choppy, really percussive types, like the falchions and the messers, most swords actually have most of the weight distribution down here, and they generally get less mass as you move towards the tip. And what this enables you to do is be more nimble with the object. Okay, so sticks are fairly ungainly. If you hold a stick in the hand that's of uniform thickness all along, surprise, surprise, it will balance in the middle. However, if I pick up a medieval style, so this is a kind of 12th century style or 11th century style sword, and balance it, it does not balance in the middle, because there's two main things at play here. Number one, the pommel, okay? So that is, or can be, it's not always, but it can be a counterbalance, and in this case it is. But equally, the blade is not as thick up here as it is down here. So we've got less mass in the blade as we get towards the tip, and we've got a pommel. And what this results in is a weapon that moves nice and easily in my hand, even though I'm holding it at the end. And this is the point. What we achieve by doing this, by having the less weight distribution towards the tip and having a pommel, is that we can now hold the weapon right at the end, and therefore effectively we gain reach. However, you don't necessarily need a pommel to do that, and a lot of people will note that sabres and cutlasses and other basket-hilted type of swords often have either no pommel or a very small pommel, and sometimes it's a hollow pommel. In fact, if you look at some of the big spherical pommels on early English backswords, they're often hollow. If you look at sabres, they often have don't have one visible here right now, but sabres often have a sort of cap on the end, and that's actually hollow. It's not a solid piece of metal. So that's not what's forming the counterbalancing effect. Actually, the counterbalancing is coming from the guard. So if you have a very big weighty guard on your sword, you don't need a big weighty pommel because your guard's already doing the job of the pommel. And we've got the fact that the blade, certainly in this case and in most sabres or backswords case, gets less weighty as we get towards the tip, so the blade gets thinner in this sense. Some blades indeed, like the Albion mercenary type blade we've got here, gets more pointy towards the end. So again, we've got less mass towards the tip and a bit of mass at the back, at the pommel, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute, this also has a longer handle. Now, so essentially there are two main ways that we've talked about so far for balancing a weapon or balancing a sword, which is what we're principally talking about, and that is by making it less mass towards the tip and having a mass as a counterbalance at the other end. However, there is another way of achieving this, and this comes back to the analogy of the stick, and you'll notice that if I have a lot of hitting power still, but it's much more nimble if I have a certain amount of the stick sticking out at the back. And that is how certain weapons like wakizashis and katanas, and indeed the German Langsmesser or Grossmesser functions, because it doesn't have a pommel at the end. However, what it does have is, just like the stick, we're essentially leaving a bit sticking out at the back. So some people will say, oh, Japanese swords or certain types of Chinese swords, or indeed Korean swords, various swords from around the world, the Burmese Da as well, don't have pommels. However, they kind of do, because what they do instead is have a long handle. And if you look at the type of swords used in Thailand as well, in Krabi Krabong and such like, they do it in exactly the same way. So rather than having a pommel as such, they have a longer grip, and this longer grip has weight to it, and it's exactly like holding the stick a little bit down from the bottom end. It means that now this weapon, be it a wakizashi or a katana or a nodashi or whatever, is now really nimble because we've got this extra bit sticking out at the bottom. Okay, and principally, especially if we're looking at something like a wakizashi, that's not, although it could look like it, it's not principally to hold the weapon with two hands because it's a very short weapon. Generally speaking, you'd be better off fighting with this one-handed and using the extra reach of your arm rather than bringing in your body to grip it with two arms. Rather, it's there as a counterbalance. Now, if we look at the long swords or bastard swords or hand-and-a-half swords, all the same thing, if they are gripped, if I just extract this one here, if they are gripped one-handed, as they often were done historically, especially if you're fighting on horseback or if you're using a shield, they have the double whammy effect of you've got the length like a katana or a wakizashi grip, but you've also got a pommel there as well, which means you can have a longer blade because you've got this double whammy balancing effect of both a longer grip, a longer hilt rather, and a pommel there. However, it should be noted that certainly if you look at the giant two-handed swords, grab this type, actually they don't have very big pommels. Despite the fact they've got very big and relatively heavy blades, because the pommel is a very long way away from the guard. So actually they naturally get good balance on them by very virtue of the fact that you've got an incredibly long grip there balancing the long blade. And to a certain extent this is also true with longswords. You often find actually that whilst a longsword might have a heavier, longer blade than a one-handed sword, often the one-handed sword will have a larger pommel because the lever, in other words the handle, is not so far away from the balance point. Okay, so a longsword, by having a longer hilt, doesn't need to have such a big pommel. There we go guys, fairly obvious stuff, but maybe the way I've explained it might give you a different way of looking at it. And essentially the headline is that all swords, whether they've got pommels or no pommels, evident, do nevertheless conform to this principle of trying to bring the point of balance closer to the hand to make them move more easily in the hand. And they achieve this through different ways, either by having a heavier hilt like the cutlass here, or by having a heavier pommel, or by having a longer grip, and therefore the grip itself counterbalances the blade. There we go guys, cheers!
Click subscribe now and also follow us on Facebook.